The Paradoxes of the Highest Science. By Eliphas Levi. Paradox 1. Religion as authorized magic. Magic constitutes the divinity of humanity conquered by science in union with faith. The true magi are men-gods, by virtue of their intimate communion with the divine principle. They are devoid of fear and bereft of desires. They are subjugated by no falsehood. They partake in no error. They love without illusion and endure suffering without impatience. For they permit all things to transpire as they may, and repose in the tranquility of eternal thought. They rely upon religion, but religion does not burden them. Religion is the sphinx which obeys, but never devours them. They comprehend the true nature of religion, and they perceive that it is both necessary and eternal. For debased souls, religion is a yoke imposed, through self-interest, by the cravenness of fear and the absurdities of hope. For exalted souls, religion is a profound force, springing from an intensified reliance upon the love of humanity. Religion is the collective poetry of magnificent souls. Her fictions are more veritable than truth itself, vaster than infinity, more enduring than eternity. In other words, they are fundamentally paradoxical. They are the dream of the infinite within the unknown, of the possible within the impossible, of the definite within the indefinable, of progress within the immutable, of absolute being within the non-existent. They are the ultimate rationale of absurdity, which affirms itself to negate doubt. They are the science of irrationality, the embrace of folly and knowledge. They are the cries of the eagle ascending above the clouds, the roar of the lion of the apocalypse, which takes unto itself wings and takes flight, the bellowing of the bull beneath the sacrificial blade, and the unceasing lamentation of mankind before the portals of the tomb. For mankind, God is and can exclusively be the human ideal. In himself, he is the unknown, but in his revelation, simultaneously divine and human, he is paradoxical man, the substantial without substance, the personal without definition, the immutable which transforms itself yet possesses no form, the omnipotent eternally struggling with the frailty of humanity, the serenity which thunders, the mercy which damns, the infinite goodness which tortures, the eternity which perishes, an infinite contradiction, the abyss of the human heart, serving as a realm. For an insatiable and terrifying idol, the cruelty of Nero, the statecraft of Tiberius drinking the blood of Jesus Christ, a papal emperor, or an imperial antipope, the king of kings, the pontiff of pontiffs, the executioner of executioners, the physician of physicians, the liberator of the free, the inflexible master of slaves. God is invariably the ideal of those who ignorantly adore him, ferocious amongst savages, imbued with human passions amidst the Greeks, an oriental despot for the Jews, jealous and merciless for the ultramontanes as a celibate priest. One and all forge a personage whom they endow to an infinite degree with their own characteristics and their own flaws. Every individual adores the God whom he has fashioned for himself in his own image, or has permitted authorities, who possess a greater or lesser interest in his ignorance and vulnerability, to impose upon him. To adore in fear and trembling is akin to hatred. Although the fear disguises the hate, to adore fearlessly is to truly love. True piety, which constitutes the foundation of religion, is the exaltation of love, for love elevated to a fervent pitch no longer admits the barriers of the possible. The impossible becomes its dream, and the miraculous, for it, becomes reality. Of what avail would be a religion that failed to bestow upon us the infinite? What is Protestantism with its sacrament utterly devoid of reality? as mournful as an extinguished taper or a dismantled church. How can the bread consecrated by the Word represent Jesus Christ if it be not Jesus himself? What absolute folly if the Christ be not divinity! A splendid form of worship, truly, to masticate a morsel of bread. Alas for him who cannot perceive the necessity for the miraculous here. One can love a human being unto death, unto the utter forgetfulness of self, unto madness, but can one immortalize him and render him divine, possessing faith in the act of rendering him divine, and thereby immortalizing oneself alongside him? Can one incorporate him into oneself? Consume him entirely and feel that he lives more vibrantly than ever, that he resides both within us and beyond us, that he absorbs us into him, just as we absorb him into us, thus drawing us into communion with his vast being and his eternal love? Alas, we perceive that he is neither eternal nor vast. Why is he not God? Why, because God alone is God. And thus does God approach us, veiled beneath the guise of bread. We behold him, we touch him, we taste him, we consume him, and his eternity trembles within our mortal flesh. The blood that palpitates within our heart is his. Our bosom swells, it is he who breathes. Ah! These Protestants with their morsel of bread and sip of wine, truly a magnificent sacrament they possess there. Faith, the poet enamored of the ideal, smiles at a ridiculous reality, but the fanatical believer grows profoundly exasperated. Reason dictates that we should pity the Protestants. No, declares infuriated faith, we must punish them. The God whom I feel growing wrathful within me condemns them to hell. Why should I begrudge them to the burning pyre? Cease, miserable assassin. Dost thou truly believe that God became man, so that man might render himself a tiger? Thou believest thyself to have conceived by means of infinite love, and behold thou art in labor with hatred. Thou hast thought to devour heaven, and behold thou vomitest hell. Thou hast partaken of the flesh of Christ not as a Christian but as a cannibal. Sacrilegious communicant, hold thy peace and cleanse thy mouth, for thy lips are dripping with blood. Indubitably, religion must not be held accountable for the crimes that the statecraft of barbarous ages has perpetrated in her name. Numerous heretics were simultaneously the agents of conspiracies and seditions. The massacre of St. Bartholomew was a cruel stratagem of war, the perfidy of which is perhaps explicated by the necessity of rendering abortive a plot no less perfidious. Thus, at any rate, did the Queen Mother and Charles IX endeavor to justify their actions. This at least remains certain that, during that epoch, both factions were capable of any outrage. Yet what could ever justify the Inquisition? God made himself man, it may be countered, and these magnificent words were interpreted by Pius V in a terrible, and by Vincent de Paul in an adorable sense. Did not God, according to the Scriptures, repent himself of having created man? Cruel exaggeration of human iniquity. It is presumed to have been so gigantic as to make God waver in his purpose. Man divinizes himself even within his crimes, and dreams of opposition to the eternal. The irreconcilable revolt of the damned, and thenceforth the cruelly impotent hatred of a God, unable any longer to pardon. Well, even this is sublime in its horror, and Catholic dogma remains admirable even unto its most dreadful depths for those souls which comprehend its poetry without falling victim to its seductions and its infatuations. God appears to repent himself of having created man, because man from time to time repents himself of having fashioned a god. Divine fictions succeed one another like the passing ages. Jupiter dethrones Saturn, and the Jesus Christ of the popes reigns in the stead of the Jehovah of the Jews. The Jesus of Saint Dominic remains nonetheless the son of the cruel God of Moses, yet the ferocious beasts of Daniel and the Apocalypse must inevitably vanish to yield their place to the dove and the lamb. God will truly have made himself man, when he shall have caused humanity to become as benevolent as a god ought to be. The genius of mankind, in developing itself throughout the course of ages, unfurls the genealogy of the gods. It is within the genius of man that an eternal Ancient of Days begets a son who must succeed his father, and wherein proceeds, from both father and son, the spirit of knowledge and intelligence which shall illuminate the mysteries of both. The Trinity, does not this emerge from the very depths of humanity? Does not man perceive it to be eternal in three persons, the Father, the Mother, and the Child? Within the human Trinity, is not the Son as ancient as the Father? For the Father, too, is a Son. Is not the woman the immaculate conception of nature and love? And this her conception, is it not entirely stainless? For the sin of love ceases where maternity commences. A profound virginity resides within the sanctity of the mother, and since God has made himself man, that is to say, since God neither truly lives for us, nor personifies himself, nor thinks, nor loves, nor speaks, save only within humanity, the ideal woman, the archetypal woman, the collective woman, is veritably the mother of God. There is redemption, that is to say, solidarity amongst men. The virtuous suffer for the wicked, and the just discharge the debts of the sinners. Thus, all is true within the dogmas of religion once we possess the key to the enigma. Catholicism is the Sphinx of modern times. Place yourself beneath its talons without divining its riddle, and it devours you. Guess its riddle without conquering it, or only half guess it, and you are doomed like Oedipus to misfortune and self-imposed blindness. An intelligent Catholic ought not to abandon the Church. He ought to remain within it, wise amidst the ignorant, free amidst slaves, to enlighten the former and liberate the latter. For I repeat once more that there is no true religion outside the pale of Catholicity. The rationale of a religion is to be irrational. Its very nature is to be supernatural. God is supersubstantial. Space and the universal substance constitute the infinite. God resides within it, for he is the knowledge and the power of the infinite. The infinite is the inevitable absurdity which imposes itself upon science. God is the paradoxical explanation of the absurdity which imposes itself upon faith. Science and faith can and ought mutually to counterbalance each other and produce equilibrium. They can never truly amalgamate. The Eternal Father is Jewish, the benevolent God is Christian, the divinity of Jesus Christ, the Pope, and the devil are Catholic, but charity, which is Catholic and, in a manner preeminent, shall suppress the devil and convert the idolaters of the Pope. Original sin is Jewish, pardon is Christian, the sacraments Catholic. Fanaticism is of Jewish origin. Good sense is Christian, simplicity and intelligence are Catholic, but pretentious folly is Protestant. Don Juan, Voltaire, the first Napoleon, Vuillet, Policanello, Pierrot, and Harlequin are Catholics, but Mons. Prudhomme is Protestant and, what is worse, a Freemason. Philosophy is either atheistic or Christian. Poetry is Catholic, and egotistic and mercantile jejuneness are Protestant. This is why France is Voltairian but still Catholic, whereas the English, the Prussians, and are Protestants. Yes, gentlemen of the ecclesiastical hierarchy, stated the Catholic Galileo, the earth is fixed, if you so desire it, it is the sun that revolves. I shall say more if you demand it. I will declare that the earth is flat and the heavens fashioned of crystal. Would to God that your skulls were forged of the same material, so as to permit a little light to penetrate to your respected brains. You represent authority, and science is bound to bow. She can well afford to bow when she encounters you, for it is she who endures, you who pass away. Your successors will e'en be compelled in their turn to bow to and live in peace with her. Rabelais, no less learned and no less a devout Catholic than Galileo, wrote the following in the prologue of his fourth book of Gargantua. If in my life, my writings, my speech, nay, even in my thoughts, I detected the faintest glimmer of heresy, with my own hands should the dry wood be gathered and the fire kindled to burn myself upon the pyre. Do you see here Rabelais, the inquisitor, burning himself, Rabelais accused of heresy? This evokes the image of God, causing God to die in order to appease God. It is inexplicable, precisely as a mystery should be, but it is only the more essentially Catholic for it. Nothing so stimulates the imagination as mystery, and an aroused imagination electrifies and multiplies the will tenfold. The wise are called upon to govern the world, but it is the madmen who overturn and metamorphose it. This is precisely why madness is regarded by Eastern nations as something divine. Indeed, to vulgar eyes, the man of genius is a madman. In truth, he harbors, perhaps, some grains of madness within him, for he almost invariably disregards common sense in order to obey the sublime sense. Moses dreams of a promised land and drags away into the desert a horde of herdsmen and slaves, who murmur, rebel, slaughter one another and perish from hunger and fatigue over the course of 40 years. He will never reach Palestine, he will die, lost upon the mountain, but his thought will have swept the heavens, and he will bequeath to the world a God unique and a universal code. From the shade of Moses unburied shall issue the immeasurable glory of Jehovah. He created a people and commenced a book, a people, bravely mean in its tenacity, at once superb and servile, a book, replete with shadows and light, possessing a grandeur and an absurdity alike superhuman. This book and this people shall withstand all force, all science, all political combinations, and all the criticisms of the nations and the revolving ages. From this book civilization will derive its worship, from this people kings will borrow their treasures, and who now will dare to judge the man of the Red Sea and Mount Horeb? What rationalistic philosopher could genuinely conclude that he was wise, but who, capable of appreciating great things, could dare to call him foolish? Shall we now speak of Jesus Christ? But here we ought to bow before him whom half the world adores. What great hierophant, what ancient oracle could ever have foreseen this God? What astrologer or what diviner could have conceived the idea of saying to the Emperor Tiberius, "At this moment a Jew of Galilee, proscribed by his own people, denied by his friends, and condemned by one of your prefects, is dying in agony. After his death he will dethrone the Caesars, and those who shall claim to continue his inconceivable dynasty will reign in Rome in your stead. All the gods of the empire and of the entire world will fall before his image. The very instrument of his punishment will become the symbol of salvation." What sheer madness is Christianity if it be not superhuman? What an awful faith that in Jesus Christ, if he be not God. Can you conceive of a mental disease, contagious enough to infect with delirium throughout a long succession of centuries almost the entirety of humanity? What a deluge of blood has that abolisher of bloody sacrifices caused to flow! What implacable hatreds, what acts of vengeance, what wars, what tortures, what massacres has not this promulgator of pardon incited? But Jesus was more than a man, he was an idea, nay, more than an idea, a principle. I am a principle that speaks, said he, speaking of himself. God has made himself man. Thus is proclaimed upon earth the worship of humanity. Emmanuel, God is within us, would declare as they embraced one another the brothers of the rosy cross, initiated into the mystery of the man-God. For truly the Son of Man is at the same time the solitary and multiple Son of God. You are one with me, stated the Master to his disciples, as my Father and I are one. He who hears you hears me, and he who sees me sees my Father. Triumph and miracle! God is no longer unknown to men, for man now knows man. He is no longer invisible when we look upon our neighbor. He is the benefactor who assists us. He is the impoverished man whom we assist. He is the sick who suffers, the physician who heals. He is the sufferer who weeps and the friend who consoles. And woman, how Christianity elevates her! What a profound assumption is hers! The woman is the mother of God since God has made himself man. A virgin, we may love her with all our aspirations toward infinity. A mother, but it is no longer sufficient merely to love her. We must adore her as we adore grace and providence. With the law of pardon upon her lips, she embodies peace and mercy. She is nature and life, representing an obedience that is free and a liberty that willingly submits. She encompasses all that we ought to love. Recite in her honor the litanies of the Virgin Mother. I salute thee, gate of heaven, temple of ivory, sanctuary of gold, mysterious rose, sacred vase of devotion, honorable vase, admirable vase, pyxis of love, cup of holy desires, star of the morning, ark of the covenant. Oh, what cries of love do all those martyrs, self-condemned to an eternal widowhood, raise unto thee, without truly comprehending them. Oh, the cruel and despairing sigh of all those Tantalises, thirsting for a draught that perpetually eludes them, provoked to longing by fruits forever denied to their lips. Sublime dreamers! They renounce woman to attain heaven, as though heaven could exist without woman, and as though woman were not the queen of heaven. O trespass of Adam, happy trespass, sings the Church in her liturgy. Happy trespass which has merited having God himself as its Redeemer. O sin of Adam, a sin truly inevitable. Thus do the innermost secrets of the sanctuary escape within the sacred chants. Yet those who repeat these mysterious words fail to grasp their true significance. And their hearts, perhaps burning beneath the ashes, accuse themselves of a desire, as though it were a disgrace, and of a regret, as though it were an infidelity. Religion, therefore, is the exaltation of man and the assumption of woman. The comprehension of religion is the emancipation of the spirit, and the Bible of the Hierophants is the Bible of liberty. To believe without knowing is weakness. To believe because one knows is power. Paradox 2. Liberty through sacred duty. Where the Spirit of God is, there is liberty, declare the Holy Scriptures. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, spoke Jesus Christ. We must escape from the bondage of the letter to the liberty of the Spirit, stated the great apostle. Furthermore, he declares, you have been purchased for a great price. Do not render yourselves the slaves of men any longer. We are the children, not the slaves of God. We are the brethren, not the slaves of Jesus Christ. The law was made for man, and not man for the law, reiterated the Divine Master. Liberty is the ultimate aim of human existence. It is within this alone that one's right and duty can be reconciled. Within this resides one's personality and autonomy, and this alone can render one capable and worthy of immortality. To emancipate ourselves from the slavery of the passions, from the tyranny of prejudices, from the errors of ignorance, the agonies of fear, and the anxieties of desire. This is the great work of life. It is intrinsically a question of being or not being. Only the free man is truly a man. Slaves are naught but animals or children. Saint Augustine encapsulates the entirety of the law in this exquisite maxim: love, and do what thou wilt. The free man can desire nothing but that which is good, for all wicked men are slaves. In accordance with the spirit of our symbols, the freedom of man constitutes God's magnum opus. For this, he permits a hell to be excavated, and the hideous shadow of the demon to be cast even unto heaven. It is for this reason that, over the more than regal tranquility of divinity, he prefers the sufferings of an accursed humanity. God aspires to the cross of the malefactor and resolves, so as not to be a despot abusing his omnipotence, to conquer, through suffering, the right to pardon rebellion. Woman has been audacious. She has desired to know. Man has been sublime. He has dared to love. And God, who strikes them even whilst admiring them, appears to have grown jealous of the patience of his children. All of this is a revelation, both poetic and esoteric. All of this has transpired within the human mind and the human heart. Man perceives his elevated dignity when he wills to be free. The eternal vulture may tear at the liver of Prometheus, yet the courage of the great sufferer is continuously reborn, expanding ever further with his audacity. Jupiter avenges himself, but he fears, and he who will give his entire heart's blood to heal the wounds of Prometheus, and who will come to suffer in his stead, shall dethrone Jupiter and prove himself more a god than he. Emancipation, liberty. This is the final word of the symbols. Jesus descended into hell to vanquish the slavery of death, and in reascending toward the light, he led captivity captive. One day, death alone shall be dead, curses alone shall be accursed, and damnation alone shall be damned. And the Spirit of light, which desires that all men be saved and that all arrive at a knowledge of the truth, God, who after having made all human beings en masse responsible for the transgression of a single individual, may well pardon all on account of the merits of one. God shall cause good to triumph, and evil shall be annihilated. The time shall arrive when it will be realized that there is no true liberty without religion, and no true religion without liberty. However, at present, religion and liberty appear mutually to exclude and battle against one another. Much like religion, liberty possesses her martyrs, and liberty shall deny authority for as long as the Church denies the rights of liberty. Ought we to concede to men the liberty of conscience? Inquired our doctors, and Rome ruled in the negative. Yet this merely signifies that the Church does not renounce the guidance of those who heed her. Liberty is not granted, she is seized, or rather, nature bestows her upon us through the aid of science. To ask whether one should permit men, true men, the liberty of conscience is akin to asking whether one should allow them a head and a heart. Did not Galileo, even after withdrawing his learned demonstrations, know that the earth revolved? Will civilization turn backward simply because there is a syllabus? Should the Pope forbid us to proceed? let us salute the Pope and continually move forward. If the Holy Father wishes to make us hear him, he must indeed move forward in his turn. It is high time for the shepherd to rise when his flock departs. Hold! Someone may object, your position as a Catholic does not permit you to speak in such a manner. If legitimate authority imposes silence upon me, I shall hold my tongue. Yet the earth still revolves. Conscience is inviolable, for it is divine, and it is, in truth, that which is essentially and absolutely free within man. For beyond the conscience, where might one find an absolute realization of that ideal liberty? From his very cradle, man is subjected to tyrannical necessities. Whether he likes it or not, he must endure throughout his life that chain of obligations which society and nature vie with one another to impose upon him. Truth and justice are austere mistresses, and love is a despot, oftentimes cruel. For him who is bereft of wealth, the strict necessities of existence loom. There is no alternative between the yoke of arduous labor and the pillory of abject misery. Those who are hailed as the masters and the fortunate ones of the world possess other adversaries and are bound by other chains. So true is this that Alexander the Great nearly envied the cynical half-madness and indifference of Diogenes. However, Diogenes and Alexander were merely the two extremes of paradoxical vanity. Both were the slaves of their own pride, and neither was a truly free man. Liberty is the full enjoyment of all those rights that do not connote a duty. It is solely through the accomplishment of duty that rights are acquired and preserved. Man possesses the right to fulfill his duty because he is bound to preserve his rights. Self-devotion is but a sublimation of duty, yet it stands as the most sublime of all rights. A man may devote himself to another, but that does not render him a slave. He may pawn his liberty, but he cannot entirely alienate it without committing a species of moral suicide. A man may dedicate his life to the triumph of an idea, provided he forever reserves the right of mental expansion and the capacity for devotion to a worthier object. A perpetual vow is an affirmation of the absolute within the relative, of knowledge within ignorance, of the immutable within the transitory, and of contradiction in all things. It is, therefore, an engagement that is fundamentally null and void, for it is rash and absurd, and to repent once one realizes its madness is not merely a right, but a profound duty. It is indeed true that the Church, whose decrees in matters of faith ought to be revered by all Catholics, sanctions perpetual vows, yet this occurs solely when such vows arise from a supernatural grace. While such pledges are void in the eyes of nature, within the supernatural order, they remain sacred and inviolable. Marriage, too, constitutes a perpetual engagement that nature does not invariably ratify. From this emerge both the just yet futile severities of morality and the consequent deterioration of manners. Thence arise, in perpetual contrast, the tears and blood of conjugal tragedy alongside the inexhaustible merriment of tales and comedies. Moses presents a formidable figure when he descends from Mount Sinai bearing horns. But why did he possess them? Because he was a married man, some unblushing Gaul might perhaps reply, and because he had absented himself from the conjugal couch for 40 nights. The ancient jest spares nothing. The two greatest freethinkers the world has ever known were Rabelais and La Fontaine, those two consummate masters of wit and humor. Both of them, moreover, were devout Catholics, entirely free from any suspicion of heresy. Rabelais had taken religious vows and possessed the astuteness to ensure he was tolerated by the Pope. La Fontaine was married, and did not live with his wife, but what magicians of style! What apostles of the pure, unvarnished truth! The oeuvre of Rabelais serves as the Bible of good sense and infallible gaiety, while that of La Fontaine represents the evangel of nature. Rabelais customarily celebrated Mass, and had La Fontaine lived during his era, he undoubtedly would not have failed to assist in the liturgy by reciting the prophecies of Baruch. One ought to do as one pleases, provided one pleases to do as one ought. This is the law of liberty. In other words, every man possesses the right to fulfill his duty, yet the primary duty of man is delineated within the first commandment of the Decalogue. Thou shalt worship one God only, and him only shalt thou obey. And Jesus, amplifying this precept to the point of endowing his explanation with a paradoxical character, did not hesitate to add, You shall call no one in this world master or father. One only is your Father, your Master, and that is God. Moreover, St. John, the intimate confidant of the thoughts of Jesus, imparts to us that God is the Word, or reason, and the Word was God. Therefore we have, and we ought to have, as our sole master only reason or the speaking Word. For the Word, St. John adds, was the true light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Jesus Christ said of himself, I am the principle that speaks. Consequently, every man who speaks in accordance with reason may declare, I am reason. And one ought to do and to avoid what it prescribes, for the will of reason prevails over the caprice of man. Caprice is merely the choice of amusements. One may pick and choose where amusements are concerned, but not in the case of duty, which imposes itself upon us, compelling us to accept and execute it. Duty crushes him who seeks to evade it, yet it bears onward with love him who accomplishes it. To will what we ought is to will what God wills. And when the will of man aligns with the divine will, it becomes omnipotent. Then it is that the miracles of faith are accomplished. Then may we command the mountains to be moved, and the fruit trees to transplant themselves into the sea, words of our Savior which must not be interpreted in their literal sense. The word of reason proves efficacious because it wills the end and determines the means. It is certain that neither the mountains nor the trees will relocate themselves of their own accord. The force manipulates the matter, and the thought directs the force. Faith avails itself of knowledge, and knowledge in turn directs faith. God himself can accomplish nothing in opposition to reason, which is the law of justice, because justice, law, and reason are God himself. God does not halt the sun and the moon merely to allow Joshua to slaughter certain Canaanites, and the announcement of such a miracle can only represent a hyperbolical figure of speech native to Oriental poetry. God does not reject a people after having chosen them, nor does he alter his religion after having delivered it as eternal. Arbitrary commands, favors, privileges, wrath, repudiation, and pardon belong solely to the weakness of man. However, to enable children to gradually comprehend reason, it is sometimes necessary to cast over it a veneer of folly. Childhood is inherently foolish. It must be provided with its absurd stories and its sensational toys. It demands its automatic dolls, its animals animated by mechanism. It is true that the child will very soon break these, in order to discover what lies inside them. And thus humanity fractures, one after another, all of its childish religions. The true religion is the eternal religion. The true piety is the piety that remains independent. The true faith is the absolute faith, which explains all symbols and transcends all dogmas. The true God is the God of reason, and his true worship resides in love and liberty. The Christians were justified in shattering the idols, because men insisted upon forcing them to adore these effigies. The Protestants were equally justified in trampling underfoot and burning the images of the saints because, in order to compel them to worship these icons, men had burned the Protestants themselves. Nevertheless, what could be more divine than the magnificent works of Phidias and the Virgins of Raphael? The worship of images, is it not fundamentally the worship of art? And was not the beautiful religion of the Greeks one of the most graceful and splendid expressions of the universal religion? I truly adore the divine majesty before the Jupiter of Phidias, immortal beauty in the Venus of Milo, the divinity of man in the Christ of Michelangelo, and the dream of heaven in the paradise of Fra Angelico. Yet if, to compel me toward the worship of one or another of these, you should show me scaffolds or blazing piles, I would despise the executioner and turn my back upon the idol. Oh, the madness of human tyranny! In France, in the very country whose name itself signifies liberty, they raised scaffolds before the idol of liberty herself. Yet Robespierre and Marat cursed the inquisitors just as the inquisitors had cursed Nero and Diocletian, and Marat and Robespierre have been cursed in their turn by later assassins, while liberty continues to remain a gory paradox, an idol demanding sacrifices. To this day, the world has persisted as a vast madhouse. Numbers have seized upon individuals, declaring to them, "Worship my slipper, or I shall burn you." If the man who fell into their clutches was cunning, he feigned worship of the slipper, and perhaps in doing so was neither a hypocrite nor an idolater. But if their victim is a guileless fellow who takes the matter in sad earnest, he resists them and thus becomes a martyr. The lassitude that succeeds debauchery drives men to the madness of suicide, and the orgies of the decadents were bound to culminate fatally in an epidemic of martyrdom. Young girls in those days skipped to the burning pyre as though to a dance, and infatuated mothers dragged their own infants to the massacre. Executioners, weary of slaughter, flung down their axes and begged for death. "Take off your neck ruffs," wrote Tertullian to the Christian women, "and make room for the saber of the executioners." Children played at martyrdom, and one was even observed heating fragments of iron red-hot to place upon his hand. Roman cruelty provoked a visceral reaction, and the taste for torture as an exhibition engendered a perverse desire to experience it as a novel sensation. When Polygnotus and Nearchus interrupted a religious ceremony and overthrew the altars of the fatherland before a horrified populace, do they appear to have acted as reasonable beings? What then? Did not St. Paul premise the folly of the cross? And Jesus himself, did he not incite a disturbance within the Temple of Jerusalem? He was God, you will tell me. So be it, but humanly speaking, his conduct was extremely irregular and highly imprudent, and you would concur with me upon this point if only you dared. Is it lawful, under the pretext that one is a god, to be less prudent than a wise man? This is what one has, if not the right, then at least the inclination to inquire, provided one accepts the Gospels as history. Yet they are more than this, they are precepts and symbols. God condemns commerce in sacred matters. He will tolerate no such trafficking within his temple, and the purveyors merit being driven forth with the lash. Their stalls should be overturned, their coin trampled underfoot. Such is the entirety of what the legend of the sellers expelled from the temple signifies. Here I bow and maintain my silence. Everything is beautiful within our religion when one knows how to truly comprehend it. All of our religion is true, and I would venture to assert that every religion is true, save for its omissions, transpositions, erroneous interpretations, rash conjectures, additions, fanciful imaginings, and myriad misunderstandings. This is what the freethinkers must ultimately realize if they do not wish to wage perpetual war against one of the most potent forces of human nature, the invincible yearning to believe in and adore something situated within the infinite, and to possess faith in a humanity that is greater in some measure than nature, so as to ascend continually toward it, and to become increasingly purified within it, in order to conquer and to reign by its power. Voltaire did not seek to obliterate religion, but he wished to reduce it to a pure deism. His motto was, God and Liberty. He who fancied himself a poet, and yet comprehended nothing of the grand epic poem of the symbols, which proceeds from blind forces to attain intelligence and liberty, impresses upon sons the sacred fire of Zoroaster, permits its theft by Prometheus in brazen defiance of Jove's thunderbolts, adores the force which it enchains at the feet of beauty, traverses the resplendent and virtually boundless domain of glorious dreams, and ultimately realizes its synthesis in the reality of man. God is no longer the giant, invisible, fantastic, solitary, hidden in the unfathomable depths of heaven. He is among us. He is within us. He has been born of woman. He is an infant whose newborn cries we hear, a youth who thinks and loves, an outlaw who struggles and suffers, a freethinker who protests, a reformer who casts out the buyers and sellers from the holy place, an accursed one who blesses and rises from the dead, the pure man who pardons the adulterous woman, the physician who heals, but also the sick man who hopes, the paralytic who rises and walks, the blind man who opens his eyes. The others are myself, declared the Savior, and he who sees me, sees also my Father. All that is done unto the least of these is done unto me, and God is in me even as I am in him. Does he speak solely of the chosen people from the blessed race of Abraham? No, for he equally blesses the Good Samaritan, the centurion, the woman of Canaan, and the vast multitude of nations whom he hopes to gather into a single fold. Therefore he who offers bread to the poor gives bread to God. He who consoles a sufferer consoles God. He who blesses an infidel blesses God. He who injures a single man injures God. He who curses one man curses God. He who slays a fellow man commits deicide. What would Jesus have thought of the pitiless priest and Levite excommunicating and condemning to death the Good Samaritan as a schismatic, and the wounded man of Jericho for having received with gratitude the aid and care of an infidel? What must his judgment be upon those inquisitors who have imprisoned, tortured, and burnt God alive? Yet the God of such men was the devil, and their religion was that of the Antichrist. Man possesses no right to slay his fellow man, except in self-defense. The execution of a criminal is a tragic misfortune of war within a society which is not yet fully Christian. But the condemned individual who accepts this expiation is the father of the good thief dying upon the cross beside the Savior, and we must perceive in him God severing himself from the brute. Crime is not a genuinely human act, but sacrifice becomes divine when it is voluntary. I am a human being, and I believe that nothing is alien to me. I am a man, and nothing human can be foreign to me. This is precisely what God has articulated to the world through the spirit of the Christian revelation. Let us seek God in nature. Let us worship him in spirit and in truth. Let us love and serve him in humanity. That is religion, eternal and definitive. And when the foremost leaders of the human family have embarked upon this path, we shall be able to declare alongside Voltaire, God is liberty, for man shall then understand God, and will thereby deserve to be free. Paradox 3. Love as the omnipotent ideal. Love is the omnipotence of the ideal. By the ideal the soul is exalted. It becomes greater than nature, more vibrantly alive than the world, loftier than science, more immortal than life itself. When Jesus Christ said, "Love God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself," this is the law and the prophets, he intended to signify. Love, love, above all things, for God is infinite love. Further, love your neighbor as yourself, that is to say, love yourself within your neighbor. Egoism, if properly ordered, commences with others. To love is to live, to love is to know, to love is to be capable, to love is to pray, to love is to become the man-God. The woman dared to ruin herself in order to pluck divinity and offer it unto man. And man, who harbored no thirst for divinity, for he possessed woman, took it as a simple matter to follow his companion into death. Thus commenced the incarnation of God. Eve compelled God to make himself man, for she had become a mother. Death and hell had reared themselves, terrible in their eternal menace, and a single instant of love had vanquished them. Love is stronger than death, declares the Song of Songs. It is more insurmountable than hell. Love is the eternal fire, and there exists no deluge which can extinguish it. Give for a little love all that you have, all that you hope for, all you value, and all you are. Your blood, your heart, your life, and your soul, and you will have purchased it for nothing. He who would save his soul from love shall lose his soul, and he who would lose his soul for love shall save it. Many sins shall be forgiven unto the heart that has loved deeply. It is Jesus Christ himself who proclaimed it. And he kept as a companion and friend the Magdalene, and he asked for drinking water from the Samaritan woman, a known sinner, and he pardoned the woman taken in adultery, and he declared that loose women would enter into heaven before Pharisees and doctors of the law, because the errors of love are far more excusable than those of pride, because it is better even to love erroneously than not to love at all. In absolute morality, good is love, evil is hate. Love must be loved and only hate hated. One single word of hate, according to the Gospels, deserves hell, and consequently one word of love merits heaven twice over. For love rewards even more liberally than hate punishes. Yet is not love itself its own profound reward? He who loves, has he not found the very key to heaven? To Saint Teresa, the ideal of hell was the impossibility of loving, and this seemed to her so profoundly dreadful that she pitied Satan. The wretched one, she used to say, he can no longer love. The woman pitied the demon. What a profound reform of Christianity! When the world shall have learned to love, the world will be saved. The man who truly knows how to love attracts unto himself all souls. To covet is not to love. To exact demands is not to love. To enslave is not to love. Jealousy is the egoism which assumes the mask of love. Excessive desire produces disgust. Exactingness merits denial. Tyranny incites rebellion in the strong and treachery in the weak. Jealousy is both odious and ridiculous. To hate the heart that no longer loves us, is it not to punish it for having loved us? Jealous fury is furious ingratitude. But there exists a sublime jealousy, which is but the zealous devotion of love. and which for the honor of love itself desires the honor of the beloved. For the beloved is forever the supreme ideal of the soul. It is the mirage of the absolute. Mere likings and passing fancies are not love. True love is the apprehension of God within man. It is the very essence of religion, of honor, of friendship, and of marriage. Not only is love immortal, but it is love that makes the soul immortal. It neither ages nor does it change. Hearts may turn away from it just as the earth turns away from the sun when she desires to slumber. And it is then that the frigidity of the night appears to descend upon the soul. Within the physical plane, love is the principle of life. In the spiritual or metaphysical plane, it is the principle of immortality. Ascending anew to the genesis of all things and disseminating itself thence over all beings, it is termed piety, charity, and goodness. When it compels a reverence for duty, it is designated honor. It is the primary catalyst of human individuality. Manifestly, it is immortal, for it yields nothing to death. It defies him, scorns him, and frequently renders him a blessing and a glory. What is a martyr but a witness who affirms the life eternal despite tortures and demise? Love affirms itself absolutely. Where love resides, there fear exists not. It imposes its own conditions upon life, and cannot be conditioned by her. Love must remain liberated within man. In nature, it is the progeny of destiny. Much like the lodestone, it possesses two forces. It attracts and repels. It creates and it destroys. It is the brother of death, yet it is the elder sibling. It is the God of whom death serves as priest, the God who illuminates death with his beauty, whilst death glorifies him through eternal sacrifices. It casts a shadow that men term hate, and this shadow is necessitated to manifest its splendor. Beauty is its smile, felicity its joy, deformity its sorrow, and anguish its proof. War is its ferocious fever, the passions, its afflictions wisdom, its triumph and repose. It is blind, yet it bears a torch. It is Lucifer, angel and demon. It is damnation and salvation. It is Eros equilibrated by Anteros. It is Saint Michael standing upon Satan as a pedestal. The grand arcanum of magic is the mystery of love. Love causes angels to perish and immortalizes demons. It transforms the sylphs, undines, and gnomes into women, and draws the elementaries down to the earth. Love has promised Pandora to Prometheus. It is for Pandora that the heart of Prometheus ceaselessly regenerates beneath the vulture's talons, and for Prometheus that Pandora still guards hope. Heaven is a hymn of love fulfilled, hell, a roar of love deceived, but, as a great poet has declared, the shadows of hell are visible darknesses, since there is perpetually some light within the night. If hell possessed not a valid cause of existence in love, it would constitute the crime of God. Hell is the laboratory of redemption, and it is eternal, so that the work of reparation may remain eternal, for God has invariably been, and always will be, what he is. Eternal suffering is the cry of eternal parturition. At the foot of the Savior's cross, in evangelical depictions, there appear two women. One stands erect and veiled, motionless and pale as a statue in the majesty of her grief. This, the Virgin without stain, the mother who conceived without sin. The other, prostrate and wailing, her hair and garments in wild disarray, her eyes red from weeping, her bosom heaving with sobs. This is the sinner, Mary Magdalene, reprobated by the world, blessed by him who perishes. On either side of Christ 2 men writhe in agony, 2 malefactors, the one repentant, the other obdurate. To the one Jesus said, I pardon thee, but to the other he did not say, I condemn thee. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.